For centuries, the universe followed one unbreakable rule: never wake the humans. No one remembered why, only that breaking it could mean disaster. But when one curious mistake stirs them from their ancient slumber, the galaxy braces for chaos and gets something far stranger. Not war, not vengeance, but coffee-fueled brilliance, wild ideas, and the loudest town hall in space. This isn't a story about fear. It's about what happens when the most unpredictable species in the cosmos finally wakes up. Again. If you're new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. The stars above the gas giant shimmered like distant sparks frozen in time. On the edge of Sector 14, a quiet research ship drifted alone, its smooth silver hull catching the light of a nearby sun. Inside the ship, known as the Starmuth, a team of Meraxi scientists carefully monitored their surroundings. The Meraxi were a thoughtful and advanced species, known across the galaxy for their crystal-like bodies and peaceful nature. For them, exploration was sacred, but there were limits, even for the curious. One of those limits was simple, repeated in every academy, engraved into every data core: never wake the humans. No one really knew why the rule existed. It had been passed down for generations, older than any recorded alliance or treaty. Every species had a version of it. From the frost-bound Talari to the winged Cyan, all followed the warning. The message was always the same: do not disturb the sleeping humans. Even in the Meraxi archives, where every known fact was carefully documented, the reason behind the rule was missing. All they had were fragments, old files, distorted recordings, rumors of ancient fear. Leonir, the chief researcher aboard the K. Starmuth, had never believed in legends. He respected them, but he believed in evidence. When the team detected a massive ship adrift in the gas giant's orbit, Leonir's interest was piqued. It matched old human vessel designs, blocky, oversized, and strangely artistic. No power, no signal, just silence. It had floated there for centuries, maybe longer. Its surface was covered in stardust and meteor marks, but the ship itself looked untouched, like it had only just arrived. Most of the crew agreed they should observe from afar and log the discovery. But Leonir, ever the scientist, wanted more. They scanned from a distance first. The ship's outer shell was incredibly old, yet showed no signs of damage. Its energy readings were low but stable. The cryogenic systems inside the ship were still functioning, holding thousands, maybe millions, of life forms in perfect suspension. So they really did sleep, murmured Firol, a junior researcher with a bright glow in his crystalline core. He was younger than most on board and fascinated by the humans. He had read everything about them: their art, their wars, their inventions. Do you think they knew what they were doing? He asked, peering at the monitor. Leonir didn't answer. He was watching a data feed coming in from the long-range probe. Something about the readings was strange. The systems were more efficient than anything the Meraxi had ever seen. The cryo chambers didn't just keep the bodies alive, they kept the minds dreaming. They weren't just resting, Leonir whispered. They were doing something in there. Still, he knew better than to get too close. The rule stood in his mind like a wall. Let them sleep. But not everyone followed the same caution. When Leonir left the control room to report back to the council, Firol acted on his own. Driven by curiosity and pride, he launched a tiny probe, a harmless one, barely larger than a grain of sand, toward the human ship. Just a look inside, he muttered to himself, programming it to slip past the outer hull and scan one of the cryopods up close. The signal was quiet, clean, and invisible to most sensors. He didn't expect anything to happen, but something did. The moment the probe entered the ship's inner shell, the lights flickered across its surface. Not just lights, patterns, symbols, glowing softly, spread like waves across the ship's body. On the Starmuth, alarms began to ring. "What is that?" shouted one technician. Leonir rushed back into the control room, his body pulsing with cold dread. The human ship, silent for centuries, had started humming, not mechanically but musically. It was as if the entire vessel had started singing a song in a language no one could understand. "What did you do?" Leonir turned sharply to Firol. The young researcher had gone dim with panic. "I only sent a passive scan. No contact, no intrusion." But the data didn't lie. The probe's signal had triggered a response, one the ship had been waiting for. Cryo chambers deep within the vessel began to glow. Slowly, softly, their lids lifted. Life signs bloomed on the monitors. Heartbeats, brainwaves, movement. On the screens they watched in stunned silence as human eyes began to open, one by one. "Emergency message to command," Leonir ordered, his voice tight with urgency. "Activate protocol blue flare, human awakening in progress, sector 14. Technicians scrambled. They had no plan for this, no training for what came next. Only the stories. Within minutes, Meraxi warships began to drop out of warp, surrounding the human vessel like silent guardians. Orders came fast from the Central Council. Contain the situation, prepare for retreat, do not engage. But none of it mattered now. The humans were awake, and whatever the old warnings had meant, whatever secrets had been hidden by the passage of time, one thing was now clear. The rule wasn't just a suggestion, it was a message from those who had once made the same mistake, and it had just been broken. The entire fleet arrived faster than anyone expected. Warships made of crystal and light appeared around the human vessel, forming a glowing net in space. From a distance it looked like an art display, but every captain knew the truth. They were here for one reason: to contain the danger before it spread. The human ship, now fully awake, was no longer quiet. Its engines rumbled softly like a beast stretching after a long sleep. Energy readings surged. Lights moved across its surface in shifting patterns. Whatever had been asleep inside was no longer resting. Inside the command bridge of the Meraxi flagship, Commander Saya stood tall and calm, but her core flickered with worry. She had led missions across 3 galaxies, brokered peace with fireborn species, and even stared down a black hole. But this was different. The warnings had never explained what would happen if humans woke up. No predictions, no plans, only silence. "Status?" she asked sharply. A technician's voice trembled as he answered. "The human vessel is fully active, life signs are stable, and their main communication system just turned on." Saya narrowed her eyes. "They're trying to speak," another voice replied from behind her. It was Amari, a specialist in languages and diplomacy. "Not yet, but their systems are online. They're watching us." Amari had studied over 1,000 languages and had a soft, glowing voice that could calm even the most tense rooms. But today her voice was uneasy. "We should talk to them before this gets worse." After a short debate among council leaders, Amari was approved to lead a small team to dock with the human ship. The plan was to offer peace, express regret, and, hopefully, calm any anger. A boarding shuttle left the Meraxi fleet and moved slowly toward the vessel now known as the Ember Ark. The humans had not resisted. In fact, they had sent a signal allowing the docking. It felt like an invitation, which confused everyone more. As the shuttle attached itself to the Ember Ark, Amari led her team through the airlock, prepared for anything. She expected weapons, strange machines, or cold silence. What she didn't expect was a man in soft cotton clothing holding a steaming mug. He looked half awake, with messy hair and a face that said he hadn't had enough sleep. "You're the ones who woke us up, aren't you?" he asked, voice low and scratchy. Amari stepped forward, her body shimmering with sincerity. "Most respected human, we come in peace. We deeply regret—" The man raised a hand, cutting her off. "Save it, Sparkleface," he muttered, sipping his drink. "You know how hard it is to get millions of people to agree on a nap schedule?" The Meraxi team froze. This was not a military leader, not a scientist or a warrior. This was someone who wanted more sleep, Another human walked in behind the first, also in sleepwear, carrying a small snack. "Did someone seriously hit the wake-up button early?" he asked. The rest of the Meraxi stood in awkward silence. This was not in their protocol. They were prepared for defense, not grumpy conversations about nap time. Amari tried again. "We were unaware our actions would cause harm. One of our young researchers—" "Of course it was a young one," the first man said. "It always is touching things they shouldn't." He pointed toward the ship's inner chambers. "We were in the middle of a very long rest. Important stuff. You messed it up." "What kind of important stuff?" Amari asked gently. She hoped to understand them better, to learn if there was something deeper behind the sleep. The man yawned and said, "Simulations, problem-solving, thought experiments. Also, we finally figured out how to fold a fitted sheet." The second human grinned. "You'd be amazed how much time you have when you're in cryo and bored." The tension slowly began to change. The Meraxi team had expected fury, maybe violence. Instead, they were getting lectures about rest, sarcasm, and complaints about snack shortages. More humans arrived, all tired, most annoyed. Some asked if their streaming subscriptions were still active. Others demanded coffee. A few were already holding meetings about how to file complaints with the Galactic Council. Back on the Meraxi flagship, Commander Saya watched the live feed in disbelief. "Is this a joke?" she whispered. "They're just irritated?" One officer replied, "Yes, Commander. Furious, but in a very passive, very loud way." As the situation developed, things took an unexpected turn. Instead of threats, the Arcadia humans requested a list of current planetary governments, recent technological changes, and, most importantly, a complete report on what had been done with their music archives. Apparently, several of their favorite songs were now considered historical relics. This caused great distress. The human leader, who finally introduced himself as Riven, stood in front of the Meraxi team, with arms crossed. "Let me get this straight," he said. "You found our ship, poked it, woke us up early, and now you're surprised we're annoyed?" Amari didn't know what to say. "We didn't mean to." "That's what they all say," Riven muttered. "Well, we're up now, so I hope you're ready, because we've had a lot of time to think." The Ember Arc systems began connecting with the nearest networks. Information flowed rapidly. Human eyes lit up. They weren't confused anymore. They were curious, excited, awake. The Meraxi hadn't just interrupted sleep. They had ended, a break from brilliance. And in that moment, Commander Saya knew. This wasn't just an accident. This was an alarm clock that had been ringing for centuries. And now that the humans were up, the galaxy was about to change in ways no one could imagine. The Ember Arc, once a quiet and drifting relic, had become the loudest place in the galaxy. Every corridor echoed with voices, complaints, laughter, arguments, and questions. Humans were fully awake now, and they were not easing into it. The Meraxi, who had been trained in calm, structured communication, were struggling to keep up. On board the ship, Riven had become the unofficial spokesperson for humanity, mostly because he was the loudest and drank the most coffee. His hair still stood up in odd directions, and his clothes looked like they had been slept in for a century, but he moved with energy that none of the Meraxi could understand. He wasn't just awake, he was alive in every sense. Across from him sat Jallo, a young Meraxi assistant assigned to observe and report on human behavior. Jallo's crystalline body glowed a soft blue, a color that usually meant confusion. He was trying to take notes, but the humans moved too fast, changed topics too often, and kept using slang that didn't translate well. "So you're telling me," Jallo asked carefully, "that you all agreed to go to sleep because you got bored?" Riven nodded, stretching out on a cushioned bench. "Yep, solved most of our problems. The world was running fine, got kinda dull, so we figured, why not take a break? We deserved it." It was hard for Jallo to process. In Meraxi culture, boredom wasn't a reason for anything, but here were the humans, treating a centuries-long nap like it was just a long weekend. The other humans around them didn't seem upset anymore. They were curious now, connecting to galactic networks, watching new media, digging through files like kids opening presents. Some were laughing. Some were arguing over which alien snack tasted best. One group had already started setting up a music stage in the ship's gathering chamber. When the Meraxi delegation asked what the humans planned to do next, Riven simply shrugged. "Catch up, look around. Probably fix a few things. We've had some ideas while sleeping." That was the moment things truly began to shift. It wasn't just that the humans were back. It was that they were ready to act. Already, they had figured out how to upgrade the ship's old systems, connect to multiple dimensions at once, and stream music from 3 galaxies simultaneously. They weren't confused by the future. They were disappointed it hadn't gone further. A group of engineers, after just 2 hours awake, had redesigned the Ember Ark's engines for fun. Another team invented a new kind of energy drink using leftover cryo-stabilizers. When one Meraxi asked if that was dangerous, the humans laughed. "Not if you know what you're doing," they said, just before one of them started glowing slightly. The biggest shock came when a human named Lena walked into the Meraxi control center and asked, "Where's the complaint box?" She was holding a list that was longer than her arm. At the top, "Bring back pizza." She waved the list like a flag. "This is just the beginning," she warned with a smile. "We've got opinions." Commander Saya, watching all of this from her ship's main screen, felt a strange mix of awe and fear. These humans weren't warlike or violent. They were loud, clever, emotional, and strangely funny. But they were also powerful. Their technology, hidden behind clunky-looking machines, was beyond anything the Council had seen. What had looked like rusted systems were actually advanced tools made to look old on purpose. "They were pretending," Saya whispered. "They've been hiding what they could really do." Back aboard the Ember Ark, the noise reached a new level. A town hall meeting had been called by the humans. Not for politics, but for complaints. Hundreds of newly awakened humans gathered in the central hall. Some were still half asleep. Others were taking notes. All of them had something to say. The Meraxi team watched in stunned silence as the meeting began. Riven stood at the front holding a cup of coffee like a trophy. "All right, folks," he said. "First item on the list, extinct foods. How did we let that happen?" The crowd responded with groans, shouts, and suggestions. "Second," he continued, "streaming services. We want access to everything, and no ads. We've waited long enough." As the meeting continued, the Meraxi realized this wasn't just complaining. It was how the humans processed change. They needed to talk, laugh, yell, and suggest weird ideas. By the end of the meeting, they had formed 3 new committees, one for cultural recovery, one for snack development, and one for reorganizing the galactic calendar to include more holidays. The Ember Ark was no longer just a ship. It had become the center of a growing storm of human energy and creativity. They weren't angry in the way the Meraxi had feared. But they weren't quiet either. They were wide awake, full of ideas, and ready to start shaping the galaxy in their own way. Back on the Meraxi flagship, Jallo turned to his supervisor with wide, glowing eyes. "What do we do now?" he asked. The older Meraxi didn't respond right away. He just stared at the Ember Ark, now pulsing with music and lights. Finally, he said, "We listen, we learn, and we try not to get in their way." The humans were back and they were just getting started. The Ember Ark had become the heart of the galaxy. What started as a strange awakening had turned into something none of the species had expected. Humans, freshly out of cryo-sleep and running almost entirely on caffeine and curiosity, had reshaped galactic society in just a few months. They didn't come with armies or demands. Instead, they came with ideas, jokes, and plans for everything, from better food systems to interstellar game nights. Every species they met was pulled into their rhythm, one that valued rest, fun, fairness, and asking questions that didn't always have answers. At first, the Meraxi and other elder species tried to resist the changes. The humans, after all, didn't follow standard diplomatic behavior. They made major decisions while wearing pajamas. Their most popular gathering was something called Movie Monday, where species from across the stars crowded around holographic screens to watch old human films and eat snacks with names no one could pronounce. Somehow, peace treaties were signed during these movie nights. Conflicts were solved over hot chocolate and trivia games. The humans had brought something into the galaxy that was both simple and powerful: community. One of the most surprising things was how quickly the younger generations of other species adapted. In particular, Sori, a young Meraxi from a quiet moon colony, had been unsure of humans at first. But after attending a workshop led by Nen, a human teacher with a soft voice and a backpack full of storybooks, she was convinced. The workshop wasn't about science or diplomacy. It was about storytelling, art, and how to make mistakes and laugh about them. Sori had never seen that kind of freedom before. Soon she was teaching her own friends how to draw cartoons and write funny poems. The humans had sparked something in the galaxy's youth, a desire to be more than just efficient. They wanted to be happy too. The Ember Arc became a meeting place for everyone. A massive new station was built nearby, called the Spark Cradle, where species could learn, rest, share ideas, and just be themselves. It had quiet rooms for meditation, loud rooms for music battles, and floating gardens where plants from dozens of planets grew side by side. It was never part of any government. It belonged to everyone. The humans had insisted on that. But then something unexpected began to happen. Humans started yawning again. Not just the kind of yawn you do when you're tired, but long, slow, meaningful yawns. It started with Riven during a conference. He paused mid-sentence, stretched, and blinked slowly. "Anyone else feeling like, 'It's nap time again?' he said with a sheepish smile. At first, everyone thought he was joking, but as days passed, more and more humans began talking about sleep. Not the kind that lasted for a few hours, but the long sleep. The deep one. The cryo-sleep they had just come out of. On the Meraxi Council ship, Commander Saya watched the news, feeds in disbelief. "They want to sleep again?" she asked no one in particular. After all this? Jallo, now more experienced and no longer easily surprised by human behavior, nodded. "They say we've got things under control now, that they've done their part." Saya didn't know what to feel. Fear? Relief? Maybe both. At a final gathering on the Ember Arc, humans and other species came together one more time. Music filled the halls. Lights danced across the walls. Even the void crawlers, once considered terrifying, were there, wrapping themselves in colorful scarves and sipping tea. Everyone knew what was coming. The humans had made their mark, reshaped the universe in their image. Now, they were ready to rest again. Riven, wearing his favorite robe and holding a steaming mug, stood in front of the crowd. "We didn't mean to shake things up this much," he said with a grin. "But once we're awake, it's hard not to do something interesting." He looked around at the smiling faces, the floating drones recording the moment, and the long list of galactic holidays now celebrated thanks to human influence. "You've got this now," he said. "You know how to have fun, how to take breaks, how to listen." As the humans entered their new pods, this time clearly marked and password protected so no one could accidentally wake them again, each one left a note, a drawing, or a joke behind. Some handed out recipes. Others gave tips for better sleep cycles. Nen gave Sori a book of blank pages and said, "Fill this with whatever makes you happy." When the final pod sealed, a message played across every major communication channel in the galaxy. It was short. "We're going to nap again, don't worry. We'll be back someday. Probably. Until then, keep things weird. And remember, always stretch before singing karaoke." In the weeks that followed, things didn't fall apart. They bloomed. The humans had given the galaxy a new way to live, and no one wanted to lose it. The Spark Cradle expanded. More community spaces opened on every major planet. The galactic schedule included dance days and quiet hours, and young leaders rose, not to enforce rules but to encourage curiosity. Saya visited the Ember Arc often. It was quiet again like before. But it felt different now, like a sleeping friend, not a forgotten mystery. Sometimes she'd sit by the viewing glass and watch the stars, wondering what dream the humans were having now. The galaxy had learned something powerful. Progress doesn't always mean moving faster. Sometimes, the biggest change comes from slowing down, sharing stories, and knowing when it's time to rest. And somewhere in that gentle silence, under the soft glow of stars, a new chapter was quietly waiting to be written.